Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm just going to give a minute or maybe 30 seconds more before we just start the conversations as people are still dialing in. Good afternoon, all. Yes. Okay, I think we are on now, and thanks for all joining in. We are going to talk about smart infrastructure asset management in the digital era, as you can hear from see from the title. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on today, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Their strong connection to land, knowledge, and community remind us that transformation isn't new. People here have been adapting, learning, and creating change for thousands of years while keeping their traditions alive. And I really connect to that because this is transformation. And when it's done well, it's about creating value without losing what matters most. So I came from Turkish heritage and I started my career with Bouygues Group, which is family-owned, multi-billion-dollar international company. When the group began its digital transformation, the annual program budget was 60 million euro. And it was a bold move for traditional organization, and we had everyone involved. What that means is we had SME leads from different countries, we had country managers, finance directors, IT specialists, consultants, the big technology partners like L&T Infotech and Capgemini, you name it. It was a massive, and it was massive, and it looked very impressive. But it also showed me how hard it's truly align people, system, and purpose. After 2 years, I was in the project as chief CTO, who had been with the company for 40 years with big respect. She lost her job. That was a real lesson for me. And when the webinar topic came up, I just thought this would be a really good topic to talk and share experiences. As a result, I brought my critical friends, David and John, to share what we experienced so far. So we got mixed people here with councils, contractors, and government agencies. So before we begin, I will just do a bit of housekeeping here, which is we love your questions and comments. So this is going to be more like a fireside chat. 3 of us will talk through. I'll just moderate the session, asking questions. At the end of the session, we aim around 40-45 minutes of our chat, discussions, and I'll leave the floor to your questions. So please feel free to ask any questions, because amongst us, we got around maybe 100 years experience in the room, and different countries, different contexts, we might be able to assist you. And if you would like to find out who we are, we got bios in the system that you can click on the icon and you can find out who we are. And if you would like to find out more about our organization, I work for Brightly Siemens, and then David works for Fulton and John is working for Saratoga. You can see all the logos of the companies at the back of our screen, so you can actually look at our companies, and if you would like to have a specific demo about what we do in Brightly Siemens, you can request that demo. So just one thing, we are all in the same room, and just we are not avatars. You will see like humanly reactions. We might look at each other and we might talk. Just bear that with us. We decided to be in the same room to get that conversation going. So in terms of, I'll just go through the introduction of our team and myself. I am Shine. I worked in different countries as civil chartered structural engineer. This is my country number 7. I did mainly road asset management operations, and I've joined Brightly Siemens as an SME to develop the transport market, responsible for roads, rail, and port. If you have any questions at the back of these discussions or anything, please connect me. So I'll pass it on to David Payne from Fulton Hogan. Would you like to just introduce yourself, David?
Thank you, Sean. I'm David Payne. I'm the National Asset Manager at Fulton Hogan. I've worked in the transport sector for many decades, particularly in roads. There's plenty of different people managing assets. I don't manage our Fulton Hogan assets. I work with clients on how they manage their assets, so particularly in that road environment. And I lead a team that looks at technology and how we use technology in the business. And as we go through this, we'll probably use examples of how that's worked. I've also been involved in the broader digital transformation at Fulton Hogan. I'll pass over to John, who'll give you a bit of his background.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Sean. I was fortunate to start my career with IBM's Federal Systems Division, where I was trained in systems integration and obviously skilled and practiced in that discipline. I was fortunate because IBM decided to move it into the commercial divisions, and I was fortunate enough to be appointed to lead the effort, first of all, for IBM in Asia Pacific, and then obviously for Saratoga at a later point in time. The transition that we're in now, or the period that we're in now, is like an innovation in a period that we've never experienced before. And it's been wonderful to be able to see digitisation coming to bear, because it's made the integration of this type of work with the business side of things and the data side, the people and technology, much, much easier. And it's also provided, through some of the tools we've got now, the facilitation to enable that to occur. So I'm very pleased to be here today at the invitation of Shine, and here with David from the practical perspective, to be able to share my experience and discuss with you and openly talk about some of the experiences that we've had with the digitisation.
Thank you, John. Before we begin to the discussions, I really would like to find out who is in the room so we can actually tune our conversation. The question is, what best describes your professional background? Can you just please vote, and I'll give 30 seconds whilst answers are populated. As you're all answering, and I can see some of the responses from the chatter box with the questions part, it's good to see some familiarized face and friends. So what we got is actually a good spread, mainly engineering and technical background, IT and digital, as expected. So I think with the group of people we have here is a balance that's what digital transformation needs to work. So I have the next question, again, is just to understand from you guys, where would you place your organization on digital journey, transformation journey? Where are you at the moment? So again, I'll just keep another 30 seconds here. And then, as I said, this is going to just more fine tune of our conversation to make sure that we have the base level. Okay, when I'm normally above 50%, I just stop that, and it's, again, looks like most of us are right kind of in the middle, so it's not just paper-based or reactive, but some digitization, but systems don't connect yet, or data is shared across the team, but insights are limited. So still progress, but it looks like there are still more rooms to connect the dots, and let's start from here. So government and infrastructure programs face constant changes, constant restructuring and shifting priorities, and short political cycles. So yet the expectation is to deliver transformation, which is never slows down. So we often start these programs with great energy and passion, but reality hits, then people move on, budget resets, and focus shifts. So my first question is going to be to John. And John, from your experience that you work with large-scale integration for big organizations and with the change programs, what separates organizations that keep their momentum and credibility through disruption from these that stall after every structure or priority changes?
Thank you, Shine. So the difference is purpose. The organisations that keep momentum link their digitisation to real achievable outcomes and business outcomes, things that people can see and feel. When teams understand why change matters and can measure the impact energy builds instead of fading. Those who stall tend to focus on structure and technology. The ones that thrive keep the focus on outcomes, aligning business, data, people and technology around a clear purpose that everyone believes in.
Thank you. So David, Fulton Hogan is a family-owned organization with a strong delivery culture. Where are you in your digital transformation as a company, and how do you balance transformation between the traditional working and you still keep the progress moving?
Interesting question, Shine. And I suppose, John, you and I have talked about this for a number of months, and as this is a journey, we've actually moved in that time. I suppose there's two areas to talk about, both the organisational wide, and John talked about some of the elements that make a success. But actually, getting the whole organisation to move at once is pretty challenging. As a business, we've probably been doing some of the digital transformation as far back as 5 or 6 years ago, and then in other areas doing very little or nothing. There's been a whole lot of momentum in our business in the last year or so to undertake broad-scale digital transformation. And that has come through getting the buy-in from senior managers to actually want to do this, because it's a significant change of business. How do we do it while we're delivering? Well, the key is we need to deliver it, but have the structures in place. And part of that is we're bringing extra people into the business who are dedicated to do this. So I work in asset management and provide technology across different systems, including asset management systems, data analytics, GIS. We've been doing this for a number of years, and we've been doing it in a microcosm of our business, and having a lot of success, not necessarily always at the start where we've actually led some of what we need to do. And as the business sees it and gets a feel of what it is, then they want a bit more and a bit more. So that's part of where we've been, but there's certainly been some big changes, and we know this is a journey. There's so many areas to cover for digital transformation.
Thank you. The next question is actually my favorite because I come from contracting background, and when we decided to go for digital transformation, there was always a battle, which is, I think every organization wrestles with this one. Who really leads the digital transformation? Is it IT or operations? And underneath that, another big question, do we go for one enterprise system that promises simplicity but long-term delivery, or build an ecosystem that's specialized tools that actually talks to one another and which is more, I would say, fit for purpose from the operational background I'm coming from? So, John, question to you with your Mendix experience, and probably people may not know what Mendix is. Maybe you want to just elaborate on that. But with your experience and integration background, how can IT and operations call on the transformation without one side shifting the other one? And also when it comes to a system, when it's a single system is the enabler, or actually it becomes a bottleneck?
So I think there's two parts to that question. And the first one is digitisation only works when operations, i.e. the business, and IT act as genuine partners. This is a dual effort. It's not something that one organisation can drive, one part of the organisation can drive. The sponsorship and what we always look for is advocacy. The advocacy has to build through the organisation or it's not going to work. Each need to understand their contribution to a shared business outcome. And I come back and focus on the business outcomes because that's how the playing field is levelled. They need not to compete for control. When both sides co-own the result, transformation has momentum. The second part of the question is where single systems enable progress when it connects to specialised tools, and there's a place for specialised systems, and some specialised systems can operate clearly standalone, and we should not walk away from that focus. However, when we're going to bring it together, as in the case of asset management, and I'll use that specifically because there are many components that asset management has to work with to make it operate effectively. We drive out value chains and we look at the systems that support asset management. We've done that many times. And there are about 16 systems in general organisations that support asset management, an effective asset management function. For instance, asset management must work with health and safety systems and they cannot sit apart. That's where the low-code application came in. That's where I found the huge advantages that we now have with low-code and AI and ML on those low-code platforms, and specifically Mendix, which I have spent a lot of time working with and implementing. And when that comes in, it's the glue that unifies the workflow, the analytics, and the data in one seamless experience. And I make it very clear that we look at 4 components when we're bringing these things together. We look at how the business is going to operate. We look at how the data is going to come together and have integrity. Look at how the people's jobs are going to be enriched, and we're going to increase productivity and make job satisfaction a greater effort within the organisation. And we look at the technology that supports it. When those 4 things come together, we finish up with a very, very cohesive operation and great benefit for the organisation. But I stress again, linked to outcomes.
And David, you are dealing with multiple asset classes, different clients. You also act as a main contractor. Then you have multiple subcontractors that are working with you. So adding to John's, what approach genuinely works in practice and when those realities collide?
Thanks, Sean. So a bit of background about our business at Fulton Hogan. We're a civil contractor, but as a business, we're very working diverse locations. And as Shine said, we've got a whole lot of different clients. So we're working for a lot of different clients at the same time, but also subcontracting out work there. As a business over time, they've been empowered local businesses to provide solutions that meet the customer's needs. And that hasn't, this is in the delivery sense. And as time's gone on, technology has supported what we're doing. But that's left us in a position where we've probably got a few too many systems and we haven't standardised. I suppose I've seen in other organisations, a number of years ago I saw a government organisation who was talking about part of their digital transformation, and they're moving from about, in asset management, about 50 systems to 6. And that has its own challenges. It's really easy to say, well, let's just go to a single or a limited number of systems. But there's a transition, even if that's going to work. And how do you deal with the legacy systems at the moment? So our business is probably one that we're not going for a single system. We operate a number of systems. In our digital transformation that we're underway, we're certainly trying to reduce some of the number of systems. Where we've got more than one system in the same area, we're looking to find what's the best system to use and implement that across the business. That's going to take some challenges because people are using current systems, and unless you get that advocacy, which is hard. We're an organisation of about 11,000 people, so with a very delivery focus, so you need to get people on board. So where John talked about how you can actually bring systems together, and more particularly, I suppose, we're talking about how we can bring data or other types of information together. That's where the power will be. And when we start to do that, we'll actually get some huge benefits in what we're doing with data. And I suppose we see it so much in life that the biggest companies in the world these days are the ones who own and utilise data. So in a business that's very delivery focused, how do we support that around data, and how's that digital transformation making the business better? I suppose one of the key changes for us, and John talked about being business-led. Certainly I've been involved in this, and then some people saying, well, this is just an IT project. And there's got little chance of success if we're leaving it up to a support function to lead the business. And so there's been people brought in to lead digital transformation in the business, and then considerations of how the interaction between the technology lead in IT and the business will interact so that we're actually getting the outcomes that the business is looking for.
Thank you. I just want to open the floor for the next poll, which is actually what is holding you back, because we understood that you are midway through in your digital transformation. And I just want to understand from the audience that what is the biggest barrier for you in your organization that digital transformation is still ongoing? So you have 5 options. I'll let 30 seconds. And the legacy systems and data silos is the winner. And the next one is equal, which is procurement and budget limitations, and organizational culture and resistance. Again, not a surprise, it's generally data and culture is always the top on the list I've seen in any time I have this dialogue. So, which actually leads nicely to the next question. And I just want to move from tools to outcomes, which is more about the avoiding digital monsters. So let's be honest, digitizing a form or building a dashboard isn't a transformation, and it's just digitization. And we've all seen programs that start with the best intentions, but we end up creating digital monsters that you need to feed that monsters with the data, with people, resources. So it's very complex, it's disconnected. It looks impressive, and maybe it works for the corporate and the finance that we have one systems or tools, but what does it actually deliver on the ground? What is the impact? So I just want to ask John that how do you help organizations stop that cycle? So to keep technology purposeful, practical, but outcome driven rather than just another compliance activities.
So you're absolutely right. Digitisation, digitising a form, building a dashboard isn't transformation, it's activity. And I think that's a really good message for people we're working with at the moment, that it becomes an activity. And I'd say that real transformation comes when every digital effort is tied to clear business outcomes. David talked about his area in Fulton Hogan and how that's very much how he's driving, has driven his move through digitisation and moving people so that they understand what he is doing and his intent. It has to be something that's measurable and meaningful. The first question I like to ask is, what problem are we solving, and how will we know when it's better and when we've got it? They're two fundamentals that you should always keep in your mind when you're doing these sorts of things. It comes back to very basic stuff. The key in keeping technology purposeful and connected is really important. The momentum drifts if the outcomes aren't focused on and driven. You end up with those digital, as I think Shine calls them, monsters, and I think we would call them digital, obviously failures in what we're putting forward. They may look impressive, but actually change nothing. That's where platforms like the low code, and specifically what I've used in Mendex, make a difference. They connect the business side of things with people and data. And obviously the systems play a really important part as you link the systems together so you can integrate to a total deliverable from a business perspective. David talked about he's not looking for a single system, and it's absolutely right. I put in multiple ERPs, very large ones, and found that the ERPs simply create havoc within the organisations as they put them through. Large ERPs across multiple regions, Europe, the Americas, and Asia Pacific, and as those things went in, they created huge problems for the field and for the people that were actually delivering the business in a longer period. So coming back to understanding the purpose of what we're doing and understanding how we can integrate the way in which people actually operate within the field is a really, really important factor as to how we take these things forward. And the tools that we do it are really important to select and to be able to use.
And David, you run different projects across different states and different contracts in terms of the types, with performance-based contract and term maintenance contracts and have you. They all have their own systems because departments have specific systems, but also they have different standards. So how do you ensure that your digital or your system solutions remains a tool for performance, which is improving safety, reliability, and services, rather than becoming an admin layer that you just report to your organization or to customers?
So it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. Where our business works both across Australia and New Zealand, in New Zealand, there's a lot more standardisation in how different aspects of delivery are done. Fairly standard contracts. In Australia, it's quite different. So we need to be flexible. But I suppose both you, Shine, and John were talking about at the broad scale. We've had some success because having started this journey, to actually step in to do the whole organisation is a real challenge. So I suppose I want to share an example which is around performance, which we did in a single contract, and how it made a difference. And it was very business focused. So we have a very complex performance regime in one of the contracts we deliver. And what we were determined to do, and this had about 14 annual or performance measures reported anywhere between monthly and annually. And within one of those, we had another 70 performance measures. So how are we getting away from actually someone spending a lot of time actually doing this at the end of every month? And how do we move from managing performance, or move to managing performance, from just reporting performance? So we connected a number of systems together so that we could actually present this data. We decided to do it every day. And when we started this contract, we ran meetings at the start to get people on board, but we're really looking at how they were using the outcomes to manage their work to get the best performance. We were measured on our performance. We have the ability during each month and during the year to make a difference. So we did that. Now, I worked in that contract for a couple of years. It's been going for about 3 years since. And I was really pleasantly surprised when I was out doing some other work recently that they've got the dashboard reporting up, and again, one of their regular meetings. So it shows, some of John's elements of advocacy, but the ownership of that. Going back a bit more to your question, where we do things in a lot of areas, we do need to do a lot of customisation. But underpinning that, we're running a business internally that's pretty similar. So how do we bring a common way of safety? We're part of our business, we're a manufacturing business. So how do we run our manufacturing in a standard way? So we can bring efficiencies. So it's about getting people on board, having processes, and then how we bring data together so we can actually run our business with much more a performance and an outcome focus. We're on a journey, as I said earlier. Some of that we're doing really well in, and other areas we're continuing to work out how to do that in better ways.
I just want to move the discussion to people, culture, and capability from here. And it's about who leads the change, is it the people or the tools? So, because I started Road AI or digital inspection 10 years ago in UK. And I remember every single road inspectors I had, they hated the technology. They sabotaged, actually, the product being working. They had zillions of reasons. So that always made me wonder about how do you actually achieve the transformation. This is actually transforming people, the way that they work. So, and we actually had a lot of discussions between John, myself, and David. So what digital actually means. Digitalizing, and everything else. So what transformation really looks like. And that says a lot. If we are discussing what that means in the leadership, and I think the people are on the ground, they might have a whole heap of definitions for what is digital, what is transformation. So, John, in your experience, how do you make digital strategy real and relatable to people on the ground and people in the office? So they are not afraid of the change, but they are not actually afraid means scared of losing their jobs as well. This is the biggest blockage I hear from people. But something also people can understand and they trust and they take ownership, because you mentioned purpose a lot. So how do you actually get the people on the ground and people to understand the purpose understand the ownership, and they trust what people are building?
There's so many ways that I can answer this question. I hope some of the audience come back with questions to us in terms of particularly this point. It's really important, and if our leaders can't clearly define what digital means, then people on the ground will fill in the gaps themselves with uncertainty, and that's where things really do lose their focus. For me, it starts with making digital human. Transformation has to connect to people and their day-to-day work. What gets easier, faster, or safer because of it? When people can see the why and the what is for me, they start to trust it and take ownership and come back to the trust question, because we have stopped talking about efficiency in a lot of the work we do and start to talk about productivity. If I look at, say, a construction site, we have people on the construction site where there's supervisors, probably, there's a supervisor for every 10 to 15 people, somewhere around that sort of area. A lot of those people spend their time in administration. Digitising means we shift those people from administrative work to actually supervising. And we reduce the paperwork, we reduce the administrative work that these people have to do so that they can focus more on obviously supervising. It's the same with operators. Operators spend time when they operate machinery in this world of ours. They have to sign the machinery off every morning, so it's got to be signed off for what work it's going to do. It's going to be signed off for what loads it's going to take. And the operator has to sign that off and it has to get it approved. That cycle, if it's paper-based, is a really significant period of time. We can make that more efficient so the operator can actually operate. And so the thing that I'll say to you is building the capability is really important, and making it meaningful for the people on the ground is really important. And stop thinking about things in terms of losing jobs and start to talk about things in terms of productivity, enhancing jobs, enhancing people's positions and the work they've got and the work they're doing is really important in driving that advocacy that David has spoken about. The second part is building capability, not dependency. You don't hand people a tool. You equip them with confidence and context. That's why culture takes over. That's where culture takes over. And that's when transformation sticks. Technology doesn't lead change. People do. Our job is to make a path clear and meaningful enough for them to want to walk the path.
Thank you, John. David, Fulton is a family-owned company with deep operational roots and a hands-on workforce. I was a bit surprised to see average years of people in the company is 30 plus. And so how do you see your transformation journey in terms of the people perspective? How do you build belief and confidence? Because who've always relied on their experience, their instincts, rather than the systems. And we just had a discussion today, your team is still working on some of the stuff on paper. So can you elaborate on this?
Well, I talked about how decentralised our business is. I've worked in a number of organisations. At this one, more than any, there's a lot of long-standing employers. We have people who have worked in the company over 40 years. Actually, at the end of this week, I'm up to 10 years, and for many people in our organisation, I'm still one of the fairly new starters. So there's a lot of entrenched behaviours, understanding, and again, we probably work in an industry where there's plenty of times people say, oh, well, they know what they do, so why should we change? I suppose, John, I talk a lot about why we're doing digital transformation and some of the work we do around efficiency, but I think John's hit on something around productivity, because maybe people are sick of hearing about efficiency and productivity, and it's, if you follow what's happening in economics in Australia, have we had much productivity growth in decades? Very little. So should people be worried about losing their jobs, as John talked about? I don't think so. We have limited, highly skilled people, and across our business, it doesn't matter what area we look in. It's very, whether it's someone working in the crews laying asphalt, or someone, say, in our IT area, it's hard to get good people. But our digital transformation, and Shai, we're talking a little bit about definitions. In our business, we've sort of tried to talk about a digital transformation in a pathway. And the first step is digitisation, and John was talking about that. So how do we get off using paper? Or one of my favourites, get off spreadsheets, which is some form of digitisation, but not necessarily a good one. But sometimes we digitise a form and then we PDF it and store it. So, it's the first step, but it's not, how do we connect this together is really important. But back on the people side, how do we do this? We seem to get a lot of success once we get people on board. Once they can see some of the benefits, I'm sure some are then less fearful about how their job will change or whether they're going to lose their role. But the other part of the people is have enough skilled people in the business. You can't necessarily ask someone who was laying asphalt one day to develop forms the next day. So how as a business do we make sure that we can implement and entrench this in our business and build the culture? And that's all throughout the organisation. Without the leadership at the higher levels, it's going to be very difficult. But I've talked about how we've done certainly some of this within areas of the business where there was not organisational-wide support. But that's some of the areas I think really in people. And we're at a transitional point. As I talk about people often working a long time in our business. When we bring new people into the business, they're expecting technology. And doesn't matter in what roles. And part of what I do is look at what we're doing in digital engineering across our business, working with other parts of our business. And when we're looking at grad programs, people are expecting that the digital is part of what their role is, and that the attractiveness of where they're actually working once they leave university is really key to that. So as a business, if you're not doing that, then it's going to be hard to attract maybe the people you want to lead this transformation or certainly be supporters and advocates of it.
Thank you. I just want to ask the final questions. Yes, sure.
Because, what David's saying is really important. We don't have enough people and enough skill in this country, and we're going to run into that problem more and more all the time. And particularly here I'm in Brisbane, we've got the Olympics coming, and there's huge plans to build accommodation, all sorts of things in this country, in this state, and we don't have the people to do it. And so enhancing the jobs that people have got, making them, increasing the productivity is really, really important for us to even be able to do what we've got to do. Everybody on this call knows the initiatives that our government are taking to build housing. It's a major problem. We don't actually have the people to achieve the housing plans that have been put together without making some major changes from the way in which we're currently doing business. And it's not going to put people out of work. It's going to enhance their jobs. And I think when we're talking about councils, we're talking about work that was in the councils, it's really important to look at the productivity gain, to look at how we don't spend money just replacing systems, because the ones you've got are doing pinpoint jobs. It's how do you bring them together, as David said, so you can see the data, you can see the information, you can see the productivity, you can see the workflow, you can see how you're operating to improve it for the people on the ground. I think that's really, really critical.
So that also leads to future readiness, because we talk about resilience and connected systems. And what we're saying is the biggest issue is actually the resources. So we need to enable resources. So I think I'm going to skip the last question because we got 15 minutes, and I'll just want to leave the floor.
So you did ask a question as to what leaders can do in the future.
Yes, maybe we can just one words because I want to get the questions from the audience. So
I'll just put, certainly Shine challenged me with lots of questions, and I think it was really important because I do think leaders are going to think in terms of ecosystems, not in terms of silos in the future. And that's going to make a difference more or less because it's insight and it's trust and connectivity through resilience, through data is going to make the difference. So I'm going to leave you with a thought that adaptability comes from insight, trust from connection, and resilience from data. So Shine, over to you, because we do need to go to the floor, but I'd really like to leave you with those thoughts.
I think just one point I want to add there. Leadership is always hard to get. Being a leader is hard on this type of transformation journey because you have day-to-day job and you have to manage it. So as a result, maybe this is not your comfort area or key skill set but you still have to sign the check and you still have to explain this and you still need to make it work. That was my very first example of chief technical officer losing her job after a big name and big credit because business thought she would be the one who could get this across, which didn't work. And she probably left very bad and miserable because that wasn't the end that she was envisaging. That's a really hard job for leaders. But at the same time, when you have tens of people working for for the project, they have expectation. They want purpose. They want clear direction. It's so much. And I think it's really important to see how do we actually get this purposefully and meaningful and connected. So I feel for both, but that's why I think it's really important to be on the journey and deliver the outcome because being digital is not an option anymore. Considering how much time we spend on our phones and on digital platforms and in Teams, even we are doing a fireside chat, but we still have to do digital platforms. We have to use the products. So that actually tells us a big story of where the future will take us. So from this, I got a couple of questions that I just would like to ask. The first question was from Liam. And the question is, if there are two systems within an asset register, in each one high level and one completed, have you had any suggestion on how to keep them synchronized?
Probably a good question for me.
Yes.
Asset management systems. I suppose this is not an untypical situation that we find ourselves in. Being a service provider and working for clients, so quite often they're running a system and we're running a system. And mostly we are not connected, which having worked as a client on client side as well is fairly concerning. I suppose the ability, and we've all talked about how you exchange data, transfer data. I remember a number of years ago, someone said, you just use an API and had to talk to people about exactly how that worked. But actually getting that connection between the systems, and it's usually through an API, is where we really need to be. And I suppose I'll take one step further. You were talking about, you were asking the question, about asset data. We're finding the more we connect, people want to connect all sorts of data. So Sean talked about performance. How do we move beyond, say, where we've got typically got systems which are around asset performance, but at the same time we've got performance measures around safety in other areas. So how do we bring that all together? And that's through the connection of that data to bring together. And that's where we get a whole lot more power and a whole lot more insight. So we might start to understand there might be a performance on that service that is not doing so well, but we might find that at the same time there's something else happening in another area which might be around our people.
Maybe what I do with the questions, because there are so many beautiful questions coming, and I'm really passionate about giving feedback to individuals. So maybe we can just touch upon the questions briefly, and then we know who asked the question, and our speakers can go back to the person in detail. Just we give the flavor. Just one point I noted, Leanne, because my background is mainly engineering and asset management, which is more from the operational aspects. But when I have come across with asset valuation and financial team, this is another area that I noticed they have two different asset register. One is asset register from the asset management system and asset register from the financial. then they never tie up. And then even though you know one source of truth, which is your asset register, management system, finance sometimes struggles to use that because there is discrepancies, there is inconsistencies. And when you're actually reporting that to Treasurer, which could cause a lot of questions in terms of audits and compliance. So that's where actually the red flags can come in. So that's probably an area that business really needs to think. How long can you carry on this way of reporting? When are you going to actually stop and reflect what is on the ground and move from that? That could be something that we really need to think. The second question I'll just take is how to convince ICT to not to go monolith system and go for best of breed, or is it monolith solution is a better way to go? This is like one single giant system versus multiple systems. So this might be a question to you, John. Because as you worked in one of the biggest company for most of your life.
Yeah, I've worked for a number of companies, and I've actually put in, 5 SAP systems across different jurisdictions across the world. And I found extreme difficulty in putting single systems like SAP with the pain it caused on the ground. So I think you've got to come back to business outcome and what you're looking to achieve. You need to know what you want out of the system, because a single solution may be what you need for a business unit, and not putting multiple solutions across multiple units. You may want to standardise, or you may want to standardise through the low-code platforms and the AI and the ML that's now available to us. It's a paradigm. We can now bring these systems together from a much more practical perspective, and it's real, to actually allow business units to operate in the way in which they need to for their customers, for the fields that they're in, and then transition that so we can get a common view across the organisation as to what our efficiencies are and how we can drive better outcomes for the business.
So John's question there is, how do you convince ICT? So your point is there are low-code platform available, there are technology available, so you can still carry on with your fit-for-purpose, best-of-breed individual products. All you do is you glue them. But in order to convince ICT, because they don't want to deal with multiple systems, they don't want to deal with multiple cybersecurity rules and breach and everything else. So you're saying there is a way to convince them that this could work and they can still achieve the operational outcomes.
It always comes back to business outcomes, and if you drive it back to that, that will actually push the answer and push the ICT side of the business to look at what specific pinpoint systems are being used and whether they're viable or not. There is obviously need for rationalisation in organisations when there are many, many systems driving the organisation. But quite seriously, it's working out and spending our time to look at getting the right answer for an organisation. And it's probably putting those brain cells together to look at solving the business problem, which is the critical point. And I'll come back to it again. It's the outcomes, the business outcomes, and then putting our heads around the best way to do it, and the least expensive way to do it.
There is another question, actually. Sorry,
I suppose I was going to add to that. Where we talked about who leads digital transformation. If it's seen in business that it's the technology and ICT are leading that, then it's going to be really hard without support of people, probably the person leading the organisation to say, no, this is a business-led initiative. And how do you convince people to be flexible? I suppose at the bottom line, who has some of the decision making on this becomes really important. And if it is the ICT decision making, you're going to have to be pretty convincing to put something else up, and probably a whole lot of technical knowledge to support that. So not necessarily the easiest thing to do.
There is a good question here, which is how do you build back trust when you're on the journey, but which you haven't been successful so far? So
it's probably the hardest question we can get.
It's Andrew is asking the question. So
I would say, one with all experience.
Yes.
Maybe I'll be able to start off with. I suppose the hardest part is when someone's got maybe the bad taste of not having success or failure. How do you deal with that? And the other part would be, you know, if you've had a bad experience, but it's a system used across the lot of the organisation, then it's going to be difficult. Where individuals don't get so much say in what can happen, and can you know, when there's a lot of people, if you're not doing it, probably gets overlooked. Where I've had some success probably in more localised solutions and outcomes is actually spending time with people, understanding what they're doing so that they are being heard, but they're seeing that what they're going to get is not just something that I'm delivering out of the box. It actually meets what they need. But then, you know, as I said, it's not necessarily, you can't go around to everybody in the business in large organisations that we all work in and expect everybody's going to get a say and someone's going to hold your hand to listen to every view. So, yeah, it's going to be challenging at times. But again, it's that people, it's the culture.
It is, but there is no disrespect to anyone because I come from construction background. I was actually operational director. When I moved to Siemens Brightly on the IT side, what I find very challenging for me is the language is very different. The way of thinking is different. And I feel like I'm explaining the project requirement in a way that I feel is operationally what I want. But when we go to the design and put that, it's very different. And I'm missing a lot of the request that I made hasn't been materialized. So it's really, we probably need kind of a translator between the operational team and the finance team and the IT team. And even though we work in the same organization, same culture, same purpose, the statement can be different. The understanding can be different. Reflection can be different. That's why I think it's absolutely critical to be on the same page for the same goal, because I've never seen anyone comes to work to say, I'm going to screw up my company today. Everybody comes to do a good job. As a result, it's more about how do we make sure that we are on the same journey. But I've also noted one of the questions was answering like, we got limited budget, we got bureaucracy, and how do you actually make, this is the word, use less, deliver more, or value for more. So I think these are all relevant and important to deliver value. So we've got two more questions, and I'll just look at...
Can I just say, because budget's really important.
Yes.
And a lot of organisations are very heavily budget driven.
Absolutely.
And let's say take care of that, because retain your legacy and work out how to keep it, because there's an investment in the legacy, and that can be retained if we're building and putting these AI engines over the top of them today. So look at how that can be done and the cost of that associated with changing the base infrastructure, because I think it can remain.
Absolutely. So we've got two more questions, or three, but what I will do is, the first one is about Brightly software can be integrated with other systems. So Joseph, I'll come back to you on that one. I acknowledge it. Yes, we have a different approach now with low code, and what can we do? Another question is about skill shortages across the infrastructure. That's Jane's questions. We will come back to that, about the women participation in construction. Yes, there's a big challenge.
So having worked in, both worked in construction, and I do now.
Yeah.
We need to make, as a business, we're trying to make construction more attractive to women, and we're doing that at all sorts of different levels, from engaging in schools around where it's not particularly around our company, and getting more girls at school interested in STEM. But there's still there's been progress in the construction industry, but there's still a way to go to make it attractive, and part of making it more attractive for women is making it more attractive for families. And I'll just leave it on that.
Yep. But also businesses are really trying with putting target in the recruitment to make workplace more attractive, more equal. But we have a long journey to go. One question from Connie: can AI help resolving discrepancies between asset registers? Connie, since I'm in Siemens with technologies and digitals, there are whole heaps of idea how AI can help. This is the key question. How can AI help on asset register, identifying defects, telling someone that they've done the wrong maintenance job? There are a whole heap of questions. We are on the journey. We are looking at it, and there is a whole heap of roadmaps. And I feel like AI is going to take a lot of thought process, and we really need to still think about how we put the engineering knowledge and thinking into the system. I think that's where the system will have a challenge. And again, if you have any questions, we are 1 minute over. And yes, good to see you, Clinton. And thank you. I hope you find the session useful. And if you have any questions to me, John or David, we are available all on LinkedIn. And we are also available via or you can all connect us. You can ask any questions. We are available. We are around. And especially if you are using Brightly software toolkits, or if you're actually using, if you Fulton Organ is your contractor, feel free to have a discussions that we could be your champions. We have so much going on at the moment in Brightly space with Siemens in terms of digital, in terms of smart, in terms of AI. I think world is your oyster at the moment, I would say. It's just we really need to start small and see what it means for you, and it translates into business, and then we can take it from there. And thank you.
So I just want to add that Mendix is also a Siemens.
Yes, exactly. When we talked about Mendix, it's Siemens platform.
It's the low-code glue that we talk about, and that's, in my view, very important to add to the different products we've got, like asset management. It's very, very valuable to help, and very happy to talk to anybody in terms of how you actually apply these low-code platforms in real situations. I know David is really interested in looking at how that can be done as well, and it is extremely valuable. I think it doesn't matter if it's Mendix, if it's other platforms, if you're really going through the transformation and the journey that gluing multiple systems. I really encourage all of you to understand what this means. Not one single system, but multiple systems can still deliver value. So feel free to connect us, talk to us if you want to find out what this product we are talking about. And I feel like in 5 years, I think everybody will do it this way. There's no brainer. That's my final summary. So for me, the takeaway is clear. I think from this, it's just without direction, without purpose, without people behind, transformation is not going to last, and it's going to fail. And transformation is not about the tools, but it's more about the people and the leadership and the persistence. And progress needs to come with doesn't gonna come with tools alone, but it needs to be aligned with the culture, with the purpose. So thank you very much all. Pleasure talking to you, and maybe we catch up next time. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.